Hey everyone, I am finally getting to my 4-part series of the major astrological configurations of 2026 that you will never experience again in your life. Okay. And anybody else alive on this planet, nobody's experienced what we're going to experience this year. You go back several generations, you can go back centuries, even millennia. Nobody's going to be, nobody's experienced what we're going to be experiencing this year. And these 4 huge astrological configurations, they're all going to happen before we get to the end of July. So the whole front part of this year is locked and loaded, and we are already feeling it. And before I get into this first configuration, I do want to mention the Saturn, Mars, Venus conjunction that's been happening or forming, I guess you could say, over the last couple of days. We're going to hit the exactness of Sun, Mars, and Venus on the same degree tomorrow. There's a lot of other things going on in the sky as well that I have not gotten into with regards to asteroids that are playing a part, certain constellations or stars that are in the background of these events. This is a pretty special setup that we've had this week, and it's just going to keep getting more interesting because, again, a lot of it, what you're seeing, there's more behind the scenes. And so a good example of that is with Maduro in custody now. We're seeing the after effects of what's happening in Venezuela with security forces going car to car and looking for supporters of Trump on mobile devices. We're seeing protests going on mostly around the United States, some in Europe, and then having Venezuelan refugees celebrating all over the world and even approaching these protests and not getting a very warm response, which is very interesting. So I just wanted to finalize this part by saying, watch what happens in the next few days. We are seeing a lot of movement, military movement of assets over to Europe and the Middle East, all under radar darkness. And we also seen a lot of interesting things going on in Iran with regards to the revolution we've all been waiting for since the Islamic State took over in 1979. So we're seeing reports about certain cities falling now. We're seeing some security forces fighting back and a lot of innocent people are getting killed. And we're seeing Israel say, we're about to do something. And then you're seeing that matched up with all these assets being moved over there. I expect something big to be happening in the next couple of days. At the same time, and I'll just put this in here, Jamie Dimon, okay, and Bank of America. Jamie Dimon is the CEO, I believe, of Chase Morgan. And he literally just came on and said something about how digital currency is the future. And this man has been saying the exact opposite about crypto and Bitcoin for at least a decade. And it's been hilarious to watch. So the fact that this man came on yesterday and said that crypto is the future and digital currency is the future, and 2 days before that, Donald Trump said, you shouldn't be selling your crypto. Go look at the markets right now. Look at silver, okay? Bank of America just admitted that they're spotting silver at over $300. So there is a supply shock coming. The financial reset is happening now. Trump just came in and talked about it as well, that this is being reset now. So things are now in motion. So everything I've been talking about up until now, let's consider this now. We are in the kinetic stage of that, okay? All right. The first astrological configuration of the year is the Saturn Neptune conjunction that I've been talking all about, February 20th, okay? But what makes this interesting beyond some of the things I want to talk about is that there's a major eclipse, an annular solar eclipse, just 3 days before that. Okay, so let's talk about Saturn and Neptune for a second. Saturn and Neptune, they can conjunct every 35 to 40 years, 35, 37 years. When they do, it is like oil and water coming together. Okay, if Neptune's possibilities, illusions, dreams, Saturn is reality, truth, the suffering that comes from that, attachments. It's also on a quantum level. Neptune's like the wave and Saturn's like the particle. So you put them together and what you're going to get is a lot of very big truths or illusions, both, all getting revealed and exposed, and dealing with the reality of what that means and potentially the suffering that comes along with it. The last time this happened was 1989, the end of the Cold War, the end of the Soviet Union, the end of an era. You go back another 34, 35 years, and you're at about 1953-ish, which was the death of Stalin. So I can keep making the pattern here, but Russia's birth chart and the original Russia birth chart from 1200 or so years ago, there's a Saturn Neptune connection. So every time there's a Saturn Neptune that happens in the sky, something goes on pivotally, existentially with Russia. Except one, I believe. Out of 15 that I looked into, only one had really nothing big going on. So when we get to February 20th, I expect some existential, pivotal reality checks when it comes to Russia's existence. Okay. When they started this war, they started it at such a wrong time for their chart. And that's why you can also see that this war, for at least their intentions, is bogged down for the last 3 years. So now let's add the eclipse. Okay. Now this eclipse is a part of a Saros cycle, which is a way to track eclipses that connect to an original eclipse and a series of them that can go back millennia. This eclipse that we're going to have is connected to an eclipse 1500 years ago. And the crazy thing about this eclipse is that if you were to try to find a place on the planet to see it, you would have to go to Antarctica. That's the only place where you're going to be able to see this eclipse. Maybe a little piece of South Africa, South America, but isn't that wild? I've talked about Antarctica and a lot of the secrets that could be revealed there soon due to anything, government exposure, geophysical events like more melting of the ice, earthquakes. We just don't know. But I found it very interesting that this eclipse is only really visible at the South Pole. So, and eclipses always have this huge eclipse window that starts about a week or so ahead of time from the first eclipse. And eclipses always come in a pair, solar and lunar, twice a year. There's exceptions, but that's normally what it is. And so you really are feeling eclipse energy a week before the first eclipse to a week after the second eclipse. So it's a pretty decent amount of time where it just gets weird. The energy is weird, and anything can really happen 3 days before to 3 days after an eclipse. And isn't February 20th 3 days after that eclipse? So what happens pivotally is, in past history, the fall of empires, the death of leaders, the death of famous people, very sudden and unexpected but pivotal events. What happened with the last eclipse last year? That had to do with Charlie Kirk's assassination. And we've seen how pivotal that has been in the dealings of this country since. So wild times. This eclipse, I had some notes here so I didn't forget about some things. It's a ring of fire eclipse, which is also interesting considering the geophysical activity that's been happening. And this alignment of planets can definitely cause magnetic disturbances running through all these planets and the sun towards our Earth. And it can cause earthquakes. It can cause sunspots. It can cause all sorts of things. And where have all the earthquakes been happening and volcanoes? Mostly around the Ring of Fire. So I talked about Antarctica. So the eclipse is going to have Mars just out of orb, 9 degrees away in Aquarius, but we also are going to have Pluto in Aquarius. So with the moon and the sun conjunction, you've got two malefic Martian energy type planets that deal with war, deal with power, frustration, anger, deep, egoic, instinctual desires coming up. Okay. It's going to be interesting to have all that energy on a solar eclipse new moon, basically. And then we're also going to have Venus. See, the new moon eclipse, all right, it has to be within a certain degree range of the nodes, the shadows of the moon. So the north node, it's actually going to be still in Pisces, but it's still close enough to cause an eclipse. And what's going to be conjunct the north node? Venus, exalted in Pisces. So Venus is all about boundaries, what we love, what we cherish, what we desire. And so we have to put boundaries up so that we still have access to what we cherish and desire and love. So it's the ability also to say no to the things that get in the way of that. So you put Venus and Rahu together, Venus in the North Node, we get more intense, more energy to that regard. And so where is this eclipse happening in certain charts of certain things? Well, with the EU, this eclipse is going to be actually happening in the 7th house of partnerships. I mean, you can't make this shit up, okay? And it's going to be in close conjunction to the natal Saturn that they have in the 7th house of relationships, partnerships, things like that. And then the conjunction of the North Node and Venus is going to be an exact trine to their sun in the 4th house of private affairs. So this eclipse and the boundaries and what's going to happen with the relationships and the connections, it's going to cause a huge stir in the 4th house, which is private affairs. So behind the scenes, it's going to really cause a lot of conflict, inner conflict and turmoil. I think that was about it with that one. And then when we get to NATO, okay, this eclipse is opposing NATO's Saturn in their birth chart, which is in the 12th house of secrets, loss, expense, isolation, solitude, places that people don't want to be seen. So again, think about where NATO's at right now. The US has been pushing Europe to take more ownership, financial ownership, military ownership of NATO, because the US has been carrying NATO for decades. And we've been watching Europe and NATO mobilize, increase defense budget spending, and move troops around, especially over to Poland, which is right on the border of where this war is happening in Ukraine. So what kind of event that this eclipse can happen? Wow, that was a weird sentence. What kind of event can happen in this eclipse that can cause such a loss for NATO? And if we read the writing on the wall, the US is definitely not applying the same kind of defense policy, foreign policy that they were up until now. So that shifts the whole game. And if the US is not going to run to Europe's rescue with an Article 5 declaration in NATO to defend anybody who's attacked in NATO, it's going to change the entire dynamic of something that was created, 80 years ago. So this Saturn Neptune conjunction mixed with the pretty intense eclipse is going to be a very significant event that's going to kick off all sorts of energy that is going to kind of herald this new era that we're coming into. So this old era that we've all been born and raised in, the generation before us since the 1940s, raising us in this era, it is done. The old is leaving, the new one is coming in. So let's watch it come in together. Okay, I'll do a second video on the next configuration pretty quick here. See you soon.